that most managers that Spurs have hired over the last few years would have been fired in these circumstances.
I wouldn't get rid of him at this stage because I understand why.
Southampton are an incredibly poor side and they're going to find themselves relegated quicker than most.
I think they're the worst team the Premier League's ever seen.
Is that refreshing honesty or asking for trouble?
The squad doesn't suit his style. They haven't got a proper wing back. I think that's a massive issue, and we saw that again.
With Amorim, I think I was led to believe he did not want the job mid-season.
Arsenal, they'd take Darwin Núñez in a heartbeat, by the way.
He's great. I think he's so unusual.
So if he was to leave, there'd be no shortage of takers.
I don't think this is a brilliant Premier League team. I don't think they're going to be vintage champions. If they win it, fair play to them. But I think they're cashing in on the fact that the quality at the top end of the Premier League, a lot of teams are underperforming this season.
It's Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, Kevin Hatchard, the European football expert, and talkSPORT's chief football correspondent, Alex Crook. Forest and Liverpool slugging it out at the top. United, dreadful. Tottenham, well, their only hope is really in the cups. Couple that with Crook's dress sense and my haircut, and we could have woken up in the 70s, Kev.
We could, but I'm bringing a bit of, youthful glamour. Look, I've got an exciting hoodie. Look at that. Just to bring down, the average age,
just to remind our viewers and listeners that we're actually in 2025, although the league table certainly doesn't give us 2025 vibes. Or does it? I mean, I can't work out, Alex, whether or not this is the best Premier League season of all time because it's so competitive, or it's concerning me about the sheer lack of quality, especially in defensive areas.
Yeah, clean sheets are hard to come by, aren't they? Anyone who plays the fantasy football games will testify to that. I think quality-wise, at the bottom of the table, it's very, very poor. I think it looks obvious now that all three teams who came up from the Championship are going to go straight back down. Southampton stinking the place out. I think Kieran McKenna actually needs to come under some scrutiny, bearing in mind that Ipswich has spent an awful lot of money and they're not much better than Saints and Leicester. And then you look at the top end. I thought this when I was watching Kev's team, Liverpool, score those 2 late goals at Brentford. I don't think this is a brilliant Premier League team. I don't think they're going to be vintage champions. If they win it, fair play to them. But I think they're cashing in on the fact that the quality at the top end of the Premier League, a lot of teams are underperforming this season.
The other argument, obviously, Kev, is that the quality of those in the middle of the Premier League, usually occupying places 13 to 8, has been raised by the level of money that they've got, and they've actually leveled the playing field a little bit, and that's what everyone wants, right? They want it to be more competitive. Is it the fact that the big boys have just taken their eye off the board? And I'm talking about Manchester United, about Chelsea, even Arsenal, and definitely Tottenham, and obviously Manchester City and Manchester United.
I think it's a mix of things. I think the first thing is we're seeing some excellent coaching. You talk about maybe a drop in quality of player. I think the quality of coaching has had a big spike. I think you look at what Andoni Iraola's done at Bournemouth, it's absolutely sensational. And you look at what Hutzela's doing at Brighton. I'm really glad that they've come through that sticky spell because he sounded the same message all the way through. Look, we're playing well, the results will come. We know we're not perfect, but we're confident that if we keep on going, those wins will come. And he was absolutely right. Thomas Frank, I think, has done a sensational job at Brentford. So I think that's the first thing. I think what you're getting is outside that's a top 4, top 5. I think there's some exceptional coaching going on. I think the other thing is injuries. I think you look everywhere around the league and in other countries as well. There are injuries everywhere you look. And I think part of that is the schedule. And part of that is the nature of the game. You look at the amount of sprints teams are doing, the pressing. It is an incredibly intense game now. It was funny, actually. I was researching for a program recently for talkSPORT, and actually I looked at the 1999 Champions League final in Barcelona between Bayern and Manchester United. It looks like a different sport, and that's not to denigrate that time. It's not about quality. If anything, some of the quality is higher then. It's about the space teams had. It's extraordinary how much space some of these players have in that game. And it made me think, well, these days, it's just players at you all the time. Yeah. And I think that's leading to injuries. And I think the mid-range teams, if you like, are taking advantage of that because some of the big boys are absolutely decimated.
Yep, absolutely. We will talk about that in further detail I think Crook made a great point on Weekend Sports Breakfast this weekend that his favourite manager to talk to after games was Thomas Frank. He would like to sit down, have a cup of tea and chew the fat with him. Apparently, one presenter did that this week. So, Crook, can we expect you in the kitchen cooking up a culinary storm for Thomas Frank next? Have you put your name into the hat to be the next person to cook him a nice dinner?
Well, there's more chance of me cooking him a nice dinner than Ange Postecoglou. We'll just say that, shall we?
Right. Okay, let's move on because it's a bumper weekend and there were lots of action, and we're going to start with Tottenham. It is now 5 points from a possible 30 for Ange Postecoglou and Tottenham Hotspur, who managed to contrive a defeat at Goodison Park. They were 3-0 down at one stage. They lost 3-2. Ange is snapping. Tottenham are 15th. They're so bad defensively that they managed to concede 3 goals to a team that had failed to score in 9 of their last 11 games prior to Sunday. That is some achievement. I mean, and if you look at the team, Kev, it's not just injuries, is it, that's causing them a problem?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think you actually look at that starting 11. Yeah, it's missing a lot of quality players, no doubt. But it should be good enough to at least compete. I think there was a little bit of a perfect storm here in the sense that David Moyes has just gone in at Everton. He'd had that first game. I actually thought they looked okay against Villa. I thought they created some chances. Maybe could have got out of that with a result. And, you know, the crowd are up. They're re-energized, new owners. David Moyes back. This is what the Friedkins do. Here's the shiny thing that you like. Here's David Moyes. That's exactly what they did at Roma with De Rossi and Ranieri. And so you do get that feel-good factor. So that's a bit of a nightmare if you're Tottenham, because you go there, you lose Dominic Solanke on the eve of the game. You've already got a ton of players out. So that mood comes down even further. And you're absolutely right. The defensive issues they have are enormous. And so much of their game is based on Van der Ven and Romero, and they're not there. And the level below has not been good enough. And I think it's a spiral, because what happens is players lose confidence, they make mistakes, the own goal is a farce. And so, yeah, they're in a really sticky spot. I actually think they should tough it out. I wouldn't get rid of him at this stage, because I understand why. But this is what Tottenham do, and it hasn't helped. It hasn't got them to where they want to be. It hasn't got them closer to where they want to be. And so you wonder, okay, if you got rid of Ange, what comes next?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I've been saying this for a very long time, that I don't think that the recipe here for success is to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's about tweaking it. It's about changing the temperature of the bathwater, isn't it? It's like, at the moment, it's just a little bit too hot. So why don't you just turn it down a little bit and make it a little bit more palatable for everybody to swim in? I mean, the fact is that most managers that Spurs have hired over the last few years would have been fired in these circumstances. But as I understand it, they're pretty clear now that they want to try and sort of end this cycle of hire and fire because of what we've just said. What's the point? You know, you've just hired loads of players that play under a certain style, fit this certain style. The last thing you want to do is change it, bring in somebody else who completely alters the philosophy, and then you've got to think about even more recruitment further down the line, which is a lot more expensive. So they don't want to do that. What they would like is for this thing to work, but it's only going to work if he compromises some of his principles. Someone needs to tap him on the shoulder and say, I'm sorry, mate, you can't keep doing it the way you're doing. You've got to make subtle adjustments and subtle changes. And he kind of did that yesterday. He went to a back three, which is the first time that they've done that this season under Ange Postecoglou. The question, I suppose, is that when does it get to the point where all the goodwill in the world and all of the sort of optimism that it will come good ends and the patience runs thin, Crook?
I think it's already running thin, although I'm not sure it's running thin with Postecoglou personally. I think, you know, if you look at the scenes post-match yesterday, I thought Son got a bit of vitriolic abuse from Tottenham fans, which didn't sit particularly well with me. Obviously, there have been protests against Daniel Levy, and usually when the heat gets cranked up on Daniel Levy, that's when the manager does become the fall guy. But I think you're right, they're determined to try and ride out this storm. I do feel sympathy in terms of the injuries. Losing Dominic Solanke now, probably for the second leg of a semi-final, I think they're going to lose anyway, is a massive blow. But they've not done enough in the window. They've signed the young goalkeeper who's been pitched in at the deep end, and we'll see how that pans out. But they're desperately short of defenders. They need somebody to take the goal-scoring burden off Solanke, and I think Postecoglou has been quite vocal about that. So at the moment, he can claim he's not been back properly in this window. You can't concede 3 goals in one half against an Everton team who've struggled to hit a barn door all season, and the defending was lamentable again. And then I feel sympathy for Postecoglou, and you look at how he conducted himself post-match. A perfectly fair question, by the way. A familiar feeling. It is a familiar feeling, because if you take away the first 10 games of his tenure in the Premier League, they've barely won a match since. They're on course to finish with 41 points this season, so just above that sort of magic 40-point mark, that fabled 40-point mark to avoid relegation. So I don't think it was an unfair question, and I think he was needlessly aggressive with that interviewee, and he's got a problem, Postecoglou, and that's why I referenced Thomas Frank yesterday. You need friends in the media when you're going through a difficult time, and he's done his best to alienate everybody.
Well, the one thing I was surprised about was that 2 weeks ago, he walked out of an interview with me and screamed at me from the corridor, "You don't have an opinion, you just sit on the fence." And then someone got off the fence and had an opinion, and he didn't like that either, Kev.
No, it's really odd. I was of the opinion at one stage, and you guys interview him, much more than I do. You have a lot of contact with him. But I was of the opinion at one stage that it was a Mourinho-esque attempt to draw attention away from his players, that we would talk about how spiky he was, talk about all the things he'd said and grumbled about in his interview, talked about him looking at the floor constantly. And we're not talking about necessarily the performance or the players or Son or whoever's underperforming in that particular week. But the more I think about it, the more I think he is just quite a spiky character. And it's not going to do him any favours, because it's a shame, because he does have some really interesting thoughts on the game. I agree with him about VAR. I can completely understand where he's coming from on that. I think he's got some really interesting tactical ideas. I speak to people who've played for him, worked with him, absolutely idolise him. I mean, there is something there, but he does his best to muddy the waters with these ridiculous interviews. I mean, I can't remember the last one that went all the way through without him having some kind of bite at somebody. And it's just not sustainable, ultimately.
Well, the problem is that what happens if you do that is that people will shine the light on your failings more often, because they're not there. They won't protect you. They won't come up with they won't look for positive reasons as to why things are going wrong. They'll look at that quote where he says, "I see it as the cards I have been dealt," and go, yeah, I can see that. If you're getting, if you're being in a situation where you feel as if this guy is working his absolute balls off to try and turn things around, and you feel that he's got the support of everybody around him, then you will look into that and think, okay, yeah, I can see that. But if you look at a guy who's basically alienating everybody that he meets and is rude to everyone, and you're hearing that actually behind the scenes he's not that much more pleasant when he's in and around the training ground on a day-to-day basis, you start thinking to yourself, well, maybe all is not well. And the narrative changes slightly, right? Because that's where you look. You look in that direction because you're thinking, well, maybe his personality is a bit of a problem here as well. Because you're not telling me that guy who stands in front of the cameras on a Saturday night isn't alienating someone in the dressing room. I mean, I'd be absolutely shocked if that wasn't the case, because his behaviour that we see is obviously giving us the impression that he can be quite a spiky, quite a combative, quite an aggressive character. So, I mean, I do think that he has a PR problem. I do think that he's got to sort that out. But all this is sort outable with Ange, right? All of it is sort outable. He just needs to compromise a little bit. He needs to just have a real serious think. Does he want to be a long-term Premier League manager at Tottenham Hotspur, or does he not? Because they will fire him if it continues like this. If they go out of the Carabao Cup, if they go out of the FA Cup, and that big weekend coming up in February when they've got those 2 games, if they lose those and they disappear and all their routes to silverware start to fritter away quite quickly, then they will sack him. Of course they will, because they're not in the business of finishing 15th in the Premier League and not challenging for any cup competitions. I mean, Daniel Levy may want to end this cycle, but the truth is they're not stupid, are they? I mean, they're not going to allow it to continue forever. What about Everton? Had a few nervy moments towards the end, but it was a vital win, wasn't it, Crook?
Yeah, it was, and I think Kev's already, touched on it. You expected a reaction from David Moyes returning, and you got one to a certain extent against Aston Villa. The difference here was they were clinical. I thought the second goal in particular from Illiman and Jai, who's largely been excellent in a really poor Everton team, was brilliant. Obviously, the crowd were up for it, and I think if they can produce for the rest of the season what they did in that first half and get a couple of additions in this month, then I think they'll be absolutely fine, Everton. I think it could prove to be quite a shrewd appointment, and it should be onwards and upwards now. And obviously, Dominic Calvert-Lewin getting on the score sheet as well will help his confidence, because I think he has looked drained of any kind of confidence in recent months, really, probably dating back to last season. So, yeah, a great day for them. Made it more difficult probably than it needed to be by conceding those 2 goals in the second half, but ultimately got the job done.
Yeah, he danced through the Tottenham defence, didn't he, to finish his first goal. And the second goal from Iliam and Jai was really impressive, actually, powerful running. But I think it did expose Radu Dragusin, who ended up going off with an injury at half-time because he had a head problem. And I just wonder whether or not that... what? He's had a what?
He's got more than a head problem. He can't defend.
Oh, that's a little bit unfair. He actually played well the other night. When was it? They played Liverpool. He played well in that game. I mean, those good performances have been few and far between, which is a big problem for Postecoglou as well. Right, let's talk about Nottingham Forest, because they are very much in the title race. If there is a title race, then the Nottingham Forest are definitely in it, because they are the closest to Liverpool. They beat Southampton by 3-2. They broke the deadlock with their very first attempt on target. And it was a really impressive goal from Elliot Anderson, who's turned into a very impressive player, hasn't he? I mean, he was great at Newcastle, Kev, but they really allowed him to flourish at the City Ground.
Yeah, I think that's his first goal, isn't it? He didn't score for Newcastle either, which I find extraordinary.
Yeah, weird, really, because he's an aggressive player.
He's such a good player, and he gets into really good positions. And he's, I know that was part of a kind of PSR wheeze, that kind of mad stuff that Newcastle and Forest did between them to kind of help each other out. But it's been such a boon for Forest. And I think, there's been an element of them having a lot of recruitment and then whittling down what they got into, a streamlined, very effective unit. And I think this goes back to what we said earlier about coaching. I think Nuno has been given a full pre-season. I thought Anthony Elanga's comments on that were really interesting, because Elanga said, look, we had a full pre-season with the manager. Now we understand what he wants. We understand how we can hurt teams. We understand where we need to be. And you can see that. Milenkovic, I think, has been a huge signing for them, literally and figuratively, because he's so important at centre-back. The improvement in Matt Sells is wild to me. In terms of, you look at his data from last season and this season, it's a massive jump. But part of that is he has solidity in front of him. You talk to ex-goalkeepers, they'll tell you, if you've got that two that you trust in front of you, and that it all comes from that, because you know what they'll block, you know what you're going to have to do, rather than having pot shots against you from here, there and everywhere. They've got such a threat on the counter. Hudson-Odoi, Elanga, Wood has been absolutely superb. It's just everything is functioning really, really well. And maybe with injuries, and maybe that's because of a high fitness level, they've not had as many of those injury problems as others.
A bit like the Tottenham game at Goodison Park. Southampton came roaring back later on and made a sort of interesting fist of it, Crook. But it's easy to play when you're 2-0 down, isn't it? You've got to throw everything but the kitchen sink at it. And in truth, Southampton are an incredibly poor side, and they're going to find themselves relegated quicker than most. Are they actually going to even get to the 11 points that Derby managed?
I can't see it. I think they're the worst team the Premier League's ever seen. I just can't see where their next victory is coming from. I think Forest probably got a bit complacent in the second half, and that allowed Southampton back into the game. If they are going to get past Derby's record low points tally, and I think that's the only thing they've got to play for now this season. I know they're still in the FA Cup, but clearly they're not going to go very far in that competition either. I think they need to play Paul Onuachu because I think he is an old school centre forward, a bit in the Chris Wood mould. If they get crosses into the box, as you saw yesterday, I think he can do a little bit of damage. And they spent a lot of money on him, for a club of their standing when they were last in the Premier League. But numerous managers have hardly used him. I think if they get him on the pitch, then maybe they might just pick up enough points to go past Derby, but I wouldn't guarantee it. Tyler Dibling's out for, I think, up to 6 weeks now, which is a huge loss for them because he's clearly their best player. Kamaldeen Sulemana can't play 2 games in a week, which again I find incredible, bearing in mind the money they spent on him. So Ivan Juric has got problems, and I still maintain my prediction. The day he walked into the football club, I don't think Ivan Juric will see out the season. I think Southampton will be on to their 3rd manager before the season is out.
Well, he's got a reputation for a bit of fight, so you never know. He might stick it out. You never know. Talk to me about Forest's 4th goal, which was chalked off for impeding Aaron Ramsdale. I mean, I've watched it quite a few times now, and Milenkovic is impeded by Chris Wood, but Chris Wood isn't impeding anybody in a Southampton shirt. The only person who you might say is affected by Chris Wood being in an offside position is Onuachu, but he hasn't got a clue, by the way, where Chris Wood is. He doesn't know what day it is. He moves backwards and then forwards, and he heads air instead of a football because he's miles away from where the ball is. So I don't really get why this goal was chalked off, because it's a subjective offside decision, and obviously we've all got different views and blah 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 blah. But like in the realms of the Premier League, why are you chalking off that goal?
Yeah, I'd have given it. I think the problem is with those specific types of decisions, they are so subjective. And there are so many moving parts to it and so many areas that are open to conjecture. It is frustrating. I think we should be looking to give goals wherever we can. Yeah. But I feel like sometimes it's the other way. I feel like sometimes they're looking for reasons to chalk goals off. I would go the other way. I would set a higher bar and say, look, is there a real reason why we should get rid of this goal? And I don't think that happens enough.
Well, he's not impeding Aaron Ramsdale. So he's not, I mean, you can say he's in the line of sight. He's not in the line of sight. You can see everything that's going in front of him, but he's in an offside position. Chris Wood's standing in an offside position. He's not impeding the defender because the defender doesn't know where he is or what he's doing, and he's not being marked properly. And the only person that's getting infringed by making a clean contact on this ball is Nikola Milenkovic, because they both seem to go for the same ball. It's Milenkovic who gets the contact on it, and his head is just harder than Chris Wood's, which is a major achievement in itself. So there's just absolutely no reason to rule out the goal. It's just crazy. It's just like another sort of layer of we have to interfere. We have to impose the rules on top of everybody. Just leave it. And that changed the nature of the game because it invited Southampton back into it. Anyway, congratulations to Nottingham Forest because they're having a fantastic, fantastic run. And when you look at their, I think it's their winning run, their unbeaten run now is just to die for. And well done to Nuno Espirito Santo because he's been incredibly impressive in getting them focused, as already Kev has mentioned. At the other end of the spectrum, Manchester United 1, Brighton 3. It is the worst start to a season since 1893-94. Ruben Amorim said afterwards he was managing arguably the worst Manchester United team in history. Crook, is that refreshing honesty or asking for trouble?
I think from a supporter's point of view, it's probably refreshing honesty because it's what the rest of us have been saying for some time now. Not sure how it's going to go down in a dressing room that notoriously is difficult to manage. But I think you can see what he's doing here. He's not making any promises about overnight fixes. I think he knows the squad needs a complete clear out. Anthony is going to go to Real Betis this week, and I think he'll go as one of the worst pound-for-pound signings, if not the worst pound-for-pound signings, not just in Manchester United history, but in the Premier League era. They're trying to get Casemiro out the football club. They're open to offers for Christian Eriksen. Obviously, the Marcus Rashford situation is ongoing. Tyrone Malacia, according to sources in Holland, is going to be allowed to go out on loan as well. It's going to leave them with quite a threadbare squad for the rest of the season because I don't see a raft of reinforcements coming in. But I like his honesty. I think the big issue that we've got, and I'll go back to what I told you about the summer when he was offered via an intermediary, Amorim, to Manchester United, and it was Dan Ashworth, I think, who fed back that his playing style, this rigid system that he has, wouldn't suit the squad. They decided not to appoint him and then changed their mind seemingly a few months later. The squad doesn't suit his style. They haven't got a proper wing back. I think that's a massive issue, and we saw that again against Brighton. They haven't got enough legs in midfield. They haven't got a number 9 who can do the type of running and the type of hold-up play that he wants to do. And that's before you get onto the useless goalkeeper. So there's so many issues that he needs to address. And it's going to be short-term pain, hopefully, from a United perspective for long-term gain. But this is going to be a roller coaster season. There's going to be some high points, but there's going to be many more lows. And we've got to the middle of January and United still haven't won back-to-back games in the Premier League.
Yeah, you forgot to mention that they haven't got the 2 10s that he wants either. In fact, the best player to play in that scenario is Mason Mount, and he's been injured, sadly. So you never know. Things might change when we get to the end of January, beginning of February, and they've got maybe 1 or 2 in on loan. You never know. That might happen. Family said, actually, my family went to the game yesterday. They said they weren't that bad. They weren't that bad. They just don't really create enough. They don't really sort of look as if they're going to score a bucket load of goals. But the goalkeeper was getting absolute pelters. And when you look at the 2 goals that Brighton scored that won them the game, both of them are his fault. I mean, he has got to come and get that cross which goes to the back post that Matoma tucks in. And I mean, no one can explain what on earth he was doing for the third one. I mean, it was an absolute calamity. An absolute
He's just not
calamity.
good enough. He can make amazing saves, as he did against Southampton. That double saving midweek was really important to the victory. But the mistakes outweigh the positives.
But this is because he's always had this problem, and Kev will tell you, right? This is a guy that has always thought that he is an outfield player that wants to play really high up and sweep up behind the defence and get involved. He wants to be involved. It's almost like he's got sort of like some sort of issue and he wants to be involved. He can't be left to his own devices. He got thrown out of the World Cup by Rigobert's Song because he wanted to play almost on the halfway line for the Cameroon international team. And someone was like, what are you doing? No, we can't do that. We're Cameroon. We haven't got the players to be able to play like that. It's the same at Ajax because he thought he thinks he's a player, doesn't he, Kev?
Well, he strikes me as somebody who actually is quite insecure in a way, and I think that's why he wants to be involved, because he feels those jitters. And I think if you look, he was at Ajax, so Ajax you're encouraged to play as a goalkeeper. You know, that leads into that. With Inter, I think Simone Inzaghi wanted him to play, but tried to kind of rein in his excesses. But you know, in that season when they got to the Champions League final, he was absolutely outstanding. He was a lot more solid than the guy that you see now. But he's always been prone to that kind of error, whether it's on the ball or whether it's coming for crosses. And his form, and Ruben Amorim talks about this, is very high highs, very low lows. And ultimately, you don't want that. What you want is a goalkeeper who's like this. And that's, I always think of Kelleher at Liverpool, for example. I think one of the things that was so impressive about him at Liverpool is he's just like on a level the whole time. And that's what you want. You want to transmit that calm. I think with Amorim, I was led to believe he did not want the job mid-season. That he wanted to see the season out with Sporting and take over in the summer when he could have a full pre-season. Yeah, well, that's it. That he not only wanted to try and win the league again with Sporting and finish their season, but he wanted to have a full pre-season with United, proper fresh start, but was told it's now or never. So he took the job. I think what he's doing with this worst team in United's history is a flag in the sand to say, right, I am judging you players publicly. You are not performing. I am going to be here in the summer. Lots of you lot will not be. So if United see that through and back him as they should, then I think that balance is where it should be. With Ten Hag and a lot of other coaches, I don't think it has been.
No, it certainly hasn't. They have conceded first in each of the last 5 home games, which in itself is a startling statistic for a Manchester United.
They got to 5 minutes, though, this time. You know, good first 5 minutes. Honestly, they're just hopeless. And I keep saying it, you know, and trouble is with this football club, they reel you back in, you know, because they knock Arsenal out the FA Cup on penalties. You think, well, there's a corner turn there. And then they're absolutely dreadful for 80 minutes against the worst team the Premier League's ever seen. It's not a surprise they lost to Brighton.
You were celebrating.
It's not a surprise they lost to Brighton.
You were celebrating.
Also, was celebrating because we don't have much to celebrate. That was relief. That was relief. Can you imagine if they'd lost to Southampton?
Surrounded by all of your hordes of kids, all in Manchester United shirts and gear, weren't you? You all were. You were all having a glass of red wine. Hey, Ahmad, yeah, fantastic. We've come back and beaten Southampton.
Can you imagine if they'd lost that game? It would have been unbearable. But, I mean, it's not just about the players and it's not just about the manager. There's big problems at that football club, okay? I was reading a story on social media about an elderly fan who's got dementia. He can't use a mobile phone to download his match tickets, so he still prints them off and gets access to the stadium that way. His ticket has been cancelled, apparently, by the football club, which is another horrendous PR look. I'm hearing stories, and I've got to firm them up, about some high-profile former Manchester United players who are having to take a pay cut for their ambassadorial roles. There are fans being given grief for standing in the Stretford end and trying to whip up an atmosphere yesterday. Ineos have created a really toxic culture on and off the pitch, and that makes Ruben Amorim's job even more difficult because you need the fans behind you.
Yeah, they've also increased the number of games in which you have to attend if you're a season ticket holder in order to qualify to buy a season ticket the next year. If you buy a season ticket, you get 19 home games or whatever it is, and those home games you have to attend now. I think it's like that. You have to attend 13 of them. Now that's like right. I get it. I understand all of that, but like it was 10, and I think there's a lot of sort of feeling amongst Manchester United fans that when they get to the summer, they're worried about what happens with the price rises for the tickets because they've seen the price rises elsewhere in the stadium, and they're thinking to themselves, well, hold on a second, am I going to be able to afford my season ticket? The process of sort of like if you can't attend, because there's a lot of people that come from a very long way to go to Manchester United. If you can't attend your season ticket, you used to be able to quickly sort of forward it on to somebody else. The process of doing all of that has become really difficult. Become like a right pain. I mean, for an example, we know of someone who had a ticket, wanted to give it to Crook, but couldn't do so unless he became a member. So Crook had to then lay out 20 quid. That's fine. Okay, we understand that. It's fine for Crook. He can do it. But Crook had to lay out 20 quid for him and his daughter in order to just be given somebody else's ticket for that game. That to me just smacks as making everything a little bit more difficult, but also putting a premium on everything. Every decision is where's the pound note coming from? Yeah, it is. It's about where's the pound note coming from, and that
and it's
can't
not
be
just
the
me,
case.
by the way. I know that at least one ex-player, and I'm sure it's the case for all of them, who also wanted to buy tickets for a family member. This is someone who's won Premier League and FA Cups for Manchester United, and he was told that he had to get a membership in order to purchase a ticket. That is outrageous.
I think there's a wider issue here. I mean, first thing, I got Ineos wrong because I thought when they came in, marginal gains, success in other sport, they're going to streamline it. They're going to be really, really positive for United. I got that totally wrong because their PR operation is an absolute disaster.
Dreadful.
And they seem to be hitting all of the wrong angles. They're going for fans. They're, cutting jobs, all of that stuff. Whereas actually, it was other areas that needed to be focused on. So that's them. But if you widen it out, I think, in top-level football, in England, other countries as well, but I think England's a big issue. Is the fan experience really at the heart of everything you're doing? That's the question every club has to ask itself. No. And I think the answer is no, and it's a resounding no in a lot of examples. Prices rising. It's not a gig. It's not a concert. It's not a normal entertainment experience. There is an emotional contract here. When you're rubbish and
it's also
you
not
haven't
a one-off.
won a game for... Yeah, exactly. It's a long-term commitment and it's got to work both ways. Fans, you go away. I mean, this United team has been dreadful for a long, long time. Fans are still going to away games. Tottenham, awful at the moment. Fans are still going to away games. They've been there for years and years and years and years. And you're making it harder for them to carry on. And what you're doing is you're hollowing out the hardcore who will follow you everywhere. This is happening at so many clubs. You are hollowing out the kind of traditional hardcore and you're trying to grab the premium tickets. It won't last. It won't last. And what you won't sell out your stadium. And when you don't sell out your stadium, the TV companies will come to you and they'll say, this is rubbish. You've only got half stadium. We're not going to pay you the amount. It will collapse. It honestly will. And that's not just on United, that's on lots of clubs. If they don't start really paying attention here, they're going to blow the whole thing up, honestly.
I've been saying this for ages. The PSR thing, the VAR thing, the way you're treating fans, you are in danger of treating this product, this golden goose that is the Premier League, the best league in the world, and you are trying to do everything you can to deflate it. Remember what is good about it. Remember what has put it where it is and harness it and maximize it because that's what has made you so successful and so rich. If you want that to continue, don't tamper with it too much. I'm talking about the government with this regulator. If you mess it up and you cause Premier League teams problems, you're going to find yourself in a situation where the attention of the globe will go somewhere else. It'll go to Italy. Look how strong Italy have been over the last few years. Do you think it's a coincidence? I don't. I can see the sort of sea change already. That maybe, just maybe, we might be in a bit of a situation where the Premier League recesses back into the pack, and that another league starts to take over in terms of supremacy. They don't want to do that. If they do that, they're going to lose a hell of a lot of money. But the fan experience, you're absolutely right about that. Going up and down the country, talking to supporters, going into stadiums. Stadiums aren't great places. They're not making them great places. And they think that they're doing this great thing with all these light shows that Crook loves. He loves a light show. Where they
Easily distracted, you see. That's the thing.
He hates them. He absolutely hates them, and I don't blame him, because it's all just nonsense. The most important thing is being able to go and have a beer with your mates, go and be able to socialise with people, be able to relax and chat. And what I was saying about it not being a one-off, I think is really key, right? Because they keep pitching it to us as the reason we've raised prices for a ticket to Fulham, or for a ticket to Tottenham, or for a ticket to Chelsea, is because it's like going to the theatre. You'd pay £100 to go to the theatre. Hold on a second. Yeah, I go to the theatre and I watch one show, and I can't go and watch it again. Football isn't the theatre. Football is a experience where I follow a team over 38 Premier League games.
Yeah.
It's a slightly different commitment, and you want me to travel, and you want me to pay for a ticket every other Saturday. It's not the same. I don't know what's going to happen with my football club. I do know what's going to happen at the theatre.
Who's going to the theatre 38 times in 9 months?
Exactly.
It doesn't happen like that. And I do think, and I know there's a danger in this debate sometimes, and I've fallen into this trap myself. I'm always very hot on the idea of football clubs being community hubs, and that you've got a local hardcore, but you've also got fans who travel from a long way. And I can be quite dismissive of fans who are in Australia or Singapore or whatever. I shouldn't do that, because their level of support, they're getting up at God knows what in the morning to watch their team.
Yeah.
Their commitment is different, but the level is the same.
And support is a broad church.
Exactly. And that should always be respected. And I have to remind myself of that sometimes. However, what I think happens is football clubs fall into the trap of, there will always be somebody who comes to get this ticket. There will always be somebody who spends whatever. I think I look at Villa, and I'm not just digging out Villa, but their supporters have complained about really high prices for Champions League games. That was totally the wrong way to do it. Totally the wrong way to do it. That should have been a reward for Villa fans to say, do you know what? You've stuck with us when we're in the Championship. We're going to keep the prices as they are, so you can watch Bayern Munich, you can watch Juventus. You don't have to fork out a lot more. So I just think clubs are getting it really badly wrong.
Yeah, and they don't care, which is the problem. They come across like they don't care, which is a big issue, because they, as you say, they think someone else will come and take their seat. The problem at Manchester United, and that's where we started the discussion, is that the other week when they played Nottingham Forest, that didn't happen, and there were loads of empty seats in the ground. Same thing against Bournemouth.
Good. Let's see more empty seats.
Manchester City beat Ipswich 6-0. It was quite one-sided, that encounter. I watched it whilst I was on the treadmill yesterday, and it was... and Ipswich have had 2 bad defeats now. I mean, they didn't play particularly well against Brighton. It was actually, Brighton weren't great, and that's the other thing I wanted to say about them earlier in the discussion. They weren't great, but they've got 2 straight wins and they're into the top 10, and they're only 4 points off the top 4, which lends itself to the debate we had at the beginning of the show. What about the rest of Saturday? Well, Liverpool are doing all right. The rescue act from Darwin Núñez. Kev, where were you? What were you doing?
I was doing commentary on Bayern Munich, and so I had a look at the phone and yelped and jumped for joy after I'd come off commentary for Bayern against Wolfsburg, which elicited quite a few strange looks from my co-commentator, but there we go. Look, I'm so pleased for him. You guys know that I'm a big Núñez head. I love him as a player. I think he's great. I think he's so unusual, but he's had a nightmare at times in terms of scoring goals. He's unusual. He's ragged. You never know what you're going to get from him. But that energy he brings and that unpredictability as well. I mean, defenders find him very confusing. I think coaches find him very confusing as well. But to be fair to Arne Slot, in the build-up to the game, he said Darwin will get his goals. They will come. He said he is going to score. But you just have to look at the other things that he does in the game. Sometimes he's too much of a hothead, but you listen to what all the other players say about him, and in the post-match, this was the theme, energy. And sometimes that's what you need. You need that when you're flagging and you can't break this team down. And Harvey Elliott deserves massive credit, by the way, for the role he played. But when a team is defending really doggedly and you can't find a way through, you just need someone a bit different. And he's absolutely a bit different. And I think, actually, if you want to encapsulate him, look at the second goal. First goal goes in. Second goal, he takes it like the most elite striker you can imagine. One touch, smash it. One touch to get the space, smash it in. That's what he is. The confidence can flick between minutes, let alone games. But I just love him. I think he's great.
Well, there's always a suggestion that he's going to be turfed out and that they're going to replace him with somebody else, or he's not going to survive in the Premier League. I think that's utter nonsense. And I'll tell you why. Because if you look around Europe for an actual number 9, there isn't that many. Right? So if he was to leave, there'd be no shortage of takers because he is part of a group, a breed that is of a premium. There isn't enough number 9s. And whether or not he is a high quality goal scoring machine or not, what he is a focal point. He is a distraction. He is unreliable and unpredictable, which has its benefits too. And he does occasionally pop up with goals. And we know he can finish because he's got a record of doing so in the Portuguese league. Maybe he hasn't shown that at Liverpool just yet. Maybe he'll never show it at Liverpool. But he will score goals, even if it's only the occasional one. And actually, if you look at some of the teams in the Premier League that are desperate for a striker, Arsenal, they'd take Darwin Núñez in a heartbeat, by the way. United, they'd take Darwin Núñez in a heartbeat. Brighton, West Ham, Bournemouth, because of their injuries. That's just 5 off the top of my head. Clubs in the Premier League that need a number 9. Tottenham need a number 9 because Solanke's injured now, for a couple of weeks. So the problem is that we sort of maybe get fixed on what he doesn't do as opposed to what he does do, really, because there will be loads of clubs that wish they had someone like that in their dressing room, or someone that they could utilise like that, Crook.
Yeah, and I think we'll look back at the end of the season on quite an important moment for Liverpool, because obviously they came into the game on the back of a couple of draws. If they dropped 2 more points, who knows? Maybe that would have given Arsenal encouragement to go on and beat Aston Villa. Psychologically, I think it was a big blow for those Arsenal players watching the Liverpool game before their match and seeing Núñez come off the bench and win it. They deserved the victory. They had 37 shots, Liverpool. They were the better team. Mo Salah wasn't quite at it. Gakpo was guilty of making the wrong choice at times as well. So I think they needed a spark from the bench, and Núñez provided it. It was almost the most incredible cameo in Premier League history, and this has gone unnoticed because he scores his first goal, whips his shirt off in celebration, chucks it in the crowd, gets a yellow card, scores his second goal, and then he's so desperate to try and get a hat-trick, he goes lunging into a tackle on Nathan Collins, doesn't get anywhere near the ball. It's the clearest second yellow card you'll ever see. The referee's absolutely bottled it. If he'd not really been booked for taking his shirt off, it's a yellow card. Arne Slot admitted that to me afterwards, that he should have been sent off. How incredible would that have been? He comes on, he scores twice in stoppage time, and he gets a red card. But how Darwin Núñez would that have been as well?
That would have been the ultimate Darwin Núñez thing, right? Absolutely. He comes on, scores twice, gets 2 stupid yellow cards, and gets sent off. I think that was the highest number of shots by an away team in a Premier League game for something like 20 years or something ridiculous like that.
Don't pretend you don't know, Kev. You've obviously you want to just get that
poured over the statistics and go. But it was, they had to be really patient. But just a couple of observations on the Liverpool side of it. I think Szoboszlai is making a real impact on this team. He almost broke the bar in the first half. I think he's perfect for this team in the way that he plays because he brings that energy. He's been taught at previous clubs how to press, when to press, and he's really refined that. And he's got such passion, I think, for Liverpool as a club and for the team in general. Also, Chiesa. It was so much fun watching his expression with the 2 goals because he's had such a miserable time with injury. At Juventus, then with Liverpool, Italy, he was, top dog at the Euros when they won it, but all the injury problems have kind of really knocked him out of whack. But what was lovely was just the pure joy of being part of something like that, and he just being on the pitch. But also, he played a role in the second goal. So I think if Liverpool can keep him fit, he won't have a massive role to play, but he'll definitely have a role to play.
Yeah, it was interesting though. After the Accrington game, Arne Slot was asked quite a lot about Federico Chiesa, and he sort of suggested that he needed to do more in order to get back fit and get into the team, and questioned whether or not maybe psychologically he was holding himself back. He scored a goal in that game against Accrington. He's played a part in this one. You never know. Hopefully, he's turning a corner now because there's definitely a player in there. And listen, even if they get 6 or 7 really good performances out of him this season and he makes a difference in those, then that's 10 million quid very well spent. Arsenal 2, Aston Villa 2. It's the first time since 2019 that Arsenal have failed to win a home game in which they've led by 2 or more goals. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, how on earth did they throw it away? They were heading closer and closer. At one point on Saturday afternoon, if Liverpool hadn't have managed to get those 2 goals and Arsenal had held on to that 2-goal lead, we were looking at a very different Premier League crew.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Psychologically, there's a big difference, I think, between the two teams. Liverpool, over the course of the season, have had that capability when they're not at their best, when it's not quite working, they find a way to grind out results. And Arsenal have been unable to do that. And they looked in such control, didn't they? 2-0 up and cruising against a Villa side who weren't really in the game. And then 2 brilliant crosses, 2 excellent finishes, and all of a sudden, they've dropped 2 massive points. And it looked like they'd got it back again at the end with that shot that was deflected off Kai Havertz. A lot of Arsenal fans have complained to me over the weekend that it didn't hit his hand. I think there's enough clear replays to say that it did. I think it's unlucky. And I don't necessarily agree with the rule, because I think if it was a defender blocking a shot in that manner, it probably wouldn't be a penalty. But the rule is that if it hits a player's hand and it goes, it results in a goal, then it will be chalked off. So I don't think they can really have too many complaints. And I do question their mentality. You look at the number of games over the course of the season where they should have won and they've ended up drawing, because they've still not lost many games. They're still unbeaten at home. But those draws have become a real problem.
Yeah, it is against the law to score with your hand. It's specifically put in the law that if the ball touches your hand accidentally or not before it goes in the goal, then it will be chalked off. It was changed the other year to make it just immediately, so it had to be the player who scored it. But yeah, it is an anomaly of the law that actually if you score a goal with your hand accidentally, then it will not count. But if you stop a goal with your hand accidentally, then it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a penalty. It's just it is an anomaly of the law. But then again, there's so many of those. Newcastle 1, Bournemouth 4. An impressive display from Bournemouth from the very start. And I noticed straight away that David Brooks took on Lewis Hall, went on the outside of him, got to the byline, produced a cross. From that moment in the first couple of minutes of the game, Lewis Hall was scared. He was scared of David Brooks. He didn't know what to do, and he was caught out of position. He was up the pitch. The ball was going in behind him. He couldn't recover. He was befuddling himself when the ball was coming over his head. He made a terrible error at one stage where he seemed to have put his body between Justin Kluivert and the ball, and then fell over and just allowed him a free run on goal. I thought Newcastle were really poor. Eddie Howe told me afterwards that he thought it was fatigue probably. And it is their first defeat since the beginning of December. So I'm sure he's not going to overreact to it. But I think it probably just sort of highlighted that they've got a really good first 11, Kev. They've got a really good first 11. But if you overwork them, then you're going to find yourself in a situation where they're going to start flagging a little bit because you're asking them to do a hell of a lot of work.
Yeah, you are, and you're asking them to do double against Bournemouth because of what they do to you. They press high, they take risks, they get in your face, they make it really, really tough. And if you're even a few percentage points off it, you're dead in the water against them because they are so well drilled. Kluivert's finishing was outrageous. I thought it was really funny that he seemed really gleeful about the fact that he'd scored more goals at Newcastle than his dad has, even though his dad used to play for Newcastle, but for a different team. So I thought that was funny. But the way he took the goals, but the hat-trick goal, my God, what an incredible strike. But you mentioned Brooks, and you were absolutely right to do so. I thought they were just terrific. And you look at the number, we talked about injuries, right? The number of injuries they have, and they're still producing what they're producing. And with Bournemouth, I always go back to that time when you were a few weeks in, they'd not won. The players didn't really understand what he wanted. It hadn't clicked. Well, yeah. If we're being truthful about it, it hadn't clicked. And this is where patience works. It doesn't always, but if you stick with the plan and you let the players absorb what are quite complex instructions, they'll eventually get it. You look at Christie. I mean, he has had an incredible season, and a lot of it is without the ball because of that, ability to win it and then switch. Great young players like Howson coming through. I said in the summer, I got asked who I thought was the most interesting transfer of the summer, and I thought him. And he hasn't always played, and it's taken him a while, but I think there's a really exciting defender there. And so, yeah, they're great. And Iraola's somebody who's done it all the way through his coaching career. Did it in Mirandes, who were a second-tier team, got them to the semi-finals of the Copa del Rey. Did it with Rayo Vallecano. They used to rough up Real Madrid, Barcelona, all the big hitters. Iraola's he's a genius. He is. And he's doing wonderful work.
He is. And he'd done it without having any of his staff. Didn't bring any staff with him when he came to Bournemouth. It's just him and what was there. He's just quite happy working on his own. He's a good lad, and he's done an impressive job. Does get a bit spiky on the bench, though, Crook, doesn't he? He's picked up quite a lot of yellow cards already this year, and him and Tommy Elphick are always in the face of the fourth official.
That's the bask in him coming out, isn't it? I think. But I mean, listen, they're not going to complain. Bournemouth, if the manager keeps picking up bookings, if they keep picking up these results, and they've had an unbelievable season. To go away to Newcastle and demolish the most informed side in the Premier League is absolutely incredible. They've beaten Arsenal at home. They've beaten Manchester City at home. They've beaten Tottenham at home. They've won 3-0 at Old Trafford. Bournemouth fans are having the time of their lives. It wasn't that long ago. They were playing Dagenham and Redbridge in League Two, by the way. It really wasn't that long ago. It's an incredible story. And David Brooks, you've mentioned him already. This time last year, he was looking for a loan move because he wasn't getting a look in under Iraola. He was still trying to rebuild himself after surviving cancer and having some injuries as well. He goes to Southampton on loan, helps them to promotion. And you wondered if he had a future at Bournemouth. Well, they're not thinking about loaning him out this season because he's become a really important player. And I think it's gone under the radar. But that, for me, is one of the feel-good stories of the season because he has so much to contend with. I remember when England played Wales, I saw him in a hotel in Qatar and he had his Wales shirt on with Brooks on the back, but he wasn't part of it because of his illness issues. So to come back from there, and that must have been a horrible moment for him to where he is now, I think it's just brilliant. And he's a lovely guy as well.
Just a quick word on Bournemouth. They have rather interesting fixtures coming up. They have Nottingham Forest at home next Saturday, followed by Liverpool at home the following Saturday. Now, are they going to have a big say in the title race? Interesting.
I love the fact you're doing your best to make it a title race by putting Forest in it. The title's done. Liverpool have won it.
You don't know that. There's a long way to go, Crook.
No.
You don't know. Stop being such a killjoy. You're so bloody Ange Postecoglou, aren't you? Getting miserable every time someone suggests something that you don't quite like. What you got this week, Crookstar?
Dipping into the Championship. I'm at Millwall Tuesday, Pompey on Wednesday. They're going well at home. And then doing the same game as you Thursday, Hoffenheim against Tottenham, which you've told me Hoffenheim is so bad that Tottenham will definitely win.
Yes, they will. Correct, Kev, tell me I'm wrong.
Even Dr. Tottenham can't rescue this patient. They are so bad. Honestly, they are so bad. So much so that Andre Kramaric, one of their longest-serving players, their record scorer, it's worth checking out, gave one of the angriest post-match interviews I think I've ever seen a player give after they lost 5-0 at Bayern. He was absolutely furious. And he said, I think I'm going to get the biggest... If I say what I really want to say, I'll get the biggest fine in Bundesliga history. So, not a happy camp at the moment.
Yes, so Tottenham will win on Thursday night. Manchester United have Rangers on Thursday night. Wow, that'd be a good game. And there's Champions League action Tuesday and Wednesday on talkSPORT. And with 3 points separating third and 19th in the Champions League table, it's going to be a tense couple of weeks or so. Kev, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much. We will see you next week, and we'll be back on Thursday with the podcast previewing the weekend's action.